Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who ruled the Roman world. Part 1. The Roman Empire before Marcus Aurelius. By the middle of the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire had reached a height of prosperity and stability unmatched in its long history. Stretching from the Atlantic coast of Britain to the deserts of Mesopotamia, from the Rhine and Danube rivers in the north to the Sahara in the south, Rome governed approximately 60 million people across 3 continents. This was the age known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a period when the Mediterranean world experienced unprecedented security, economic growth, and cultural flourishing. When Antoninus Pius became emperor in AD 138, he inherited an empire at peace. Unlike many of his predecessors, Antoninus never personally commanded armies on distant frontiers or traveled extensively through the provinces. Instead, he governed from Rome itself, administering the vast territorial holdings with a steady hand and careful attention to legal and administrative matters. His reign lasted 23 years, one of the longest and most peaceful in Roman history. The frontiers remained secure, the treasury stayed full, and the provinces prospered under competent governors and fair taxation. This stability was not accidental. Rome had developed a remarkable system of succession that broke from the destructive pattern of hereditary monarchy. Beginning with the Emperor Nerva in AD 96, Rome's rulers had adopted capable men as their heirs rather than relying on biological sons. Trajan, Hadrian, and Antoninus Pius had each been selected for their administrative skills, military competence, and moral character. Historians later called them, together with Marcus Aurelius, the 5 good emperors. This adoptive system ensured that experience and ability, rather than mere bloodline, determined who would wield supreme power. The empire Marcus would inherit was wealthy, well-administered, and protected by disciplined legions stationed along thousands of miles of frontier. Roman law brought order to diverse peoples. Roman roads connected cities across vast distances. Roman engineering provided aqueducts, baths, and public buildings that demonstrated the benefits of imperial rule. Literature, philosophy, and architecture flourished in both Latin and Greek. For the educated classes especially, this was a golden age. Yet beneath this surface prosperity, problems were accumulating. The frontiers faced increasing pressure from Germanic tribes in the Parthian Empire. The imperial succession system, while effective, depended entirely on the wisdom of each emperor's choice. And the very peace and prosperity of the age had made Romans unprepared for the catastrophes that would soon arrive. Sources used. Birley, Anthony R. Marcus Aurelius. A Biography, pp. 3447. McLynn, Frank. Marcus Aurelius. A Life, pp. 7389. Beard, Mary. SPQR. A History of Ancient Rome, pp. 489. 503. Grant, Michael. The Antonines. The Roman Empire and Transition, pp. 2138. Part 2. Childhood, Family, and Education. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was born on April 26, AD 121, with the original name Marcus Annius Verus. His family belonged to Rome's highest aristocracy. His paternal grandfather, also named Marcus Annius Verus, had served as consul and held the rank of patrician. His mother, Domitia Lucilla, came from an equally distinguished family and possessed considerable wealth, including brickworks that supplied much of Rome's construction industry. This was the world of the senatorial elite, where education, public service, and adherence to traditional Roman values defined one's place in society. Marcus's father died when the boy was young, probably around age 3. He was raised primarily by his grandfather and his mother, both of whom ensured he received the finest education available in the empire. From his earliest years, Marcus studied with private tutors who instructed him in Greek and Latin literature, rhetoric, mathematics, and music. Ancient sources indicate that even as a child, Marcus showed unusual seriousness and dedication to his studies. The Historia Augusta, though not always reliable in its details, reports that he preferred philosophy to the games and pastimes typical of Roman aristocratic youth. The turning point in Marcus's intellectual development came through his introduction to Stoic philosophy. Around age 12, he began studying with Apollonius of Chalcedon, a Stoic teacher who instructed him in the fundamental principles of this philosophical school. Stoicism taught that the universe operated according to rational principles, that virtue was the only true good, and that individuals should focus on what lay within their control while accepting with equanimity what did not. These ideas resonated deeply with the young Marcus. He adopted the simple dress and austere habits of a philosophical student, sleeping on the ground until his mother persuaded him to use a bed. The philosopher who influenced Marcus most profoundly was Epictetus, a former slave who had taught in Rome during the previous generation. Though Epictetus himself had died before Marcus was born, his student Arrian had compiled the teacher's lectures into a work called the Discourses. Marcus studied these texts intensively. Another crucial figure was Quintus Junius Rusticus, a distinguished senator and Stoic philosopher who became Marcus's personal tutor. Rusticus introduced Marcus to Epictetus's writings and guided his development in Stoic practice. In his Meditations, written decades later, Marcus would express profound gratitude to Rusticus for teaching him self-control and directing him toward philosophy. Emperor Hadrian, known for his intellectual interests and careful attention to governance, noticed the serious young aristocrat. Hadrian gave Marcus a nickname, Verissimus, meaning most truthful, which suggests the emperor recognized the boy's earnest character. In AD 136, when Marcus was 15, Hadrian designated him for future advancement by enrolling him in the equestrian order and arranging a betrothal to the daughter of the man Hadrian planned to make his successor. Though this particular succession plan would change, Marcus had entered the path toward imperial power. Sources used, Birley Anthony R. Marcus Aurelius, a biography pp. 4871 McLynn Frank Marcus Aurelius, a life pp. 91-127 Robertson Donald, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, The Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius pp. 4167 Historia Augusta, Life of Marcus Aurelius, Sections 2-4 Part 3, Becoming heir to the Empire. Hadrian's succession arrangements grew complicated in his final years. His first choice as successor died unexpectedly, forcing the aging emperor to select someone else. In AD 138, Hadrian adopted Antoninus Pius on the condition that Antoninus immediately adopt two younger men, Marcus, now 17, and Lucius Verus, age 7. This double adoption ensured succession for 2 generations. Hadrian died shortly after, and Antoninus Pius became emperor. Marcus, now officially named Marcus Aelius Aurelius Verus, became heir apparent. The adoption transformed Marcus's life. He moved into the imperial household and began the intensive preparation necessary for governing the empire. Antoninus arranged for Marcus to marry his daughter, Faustina the Younger, in AD 145. The marriage appears to have been affectionate despite the political motivations behind it. Faustina would bear Marcus at least 13 children over the course of their marriage, though many died young, as was tragically common in the ancient world. Only 6 survived to adulthood, including just one son, Commodus. Under Antoninus's guidance, Marcus received a thorough education in imperial administration. He attended meetings of the emperor's advisory council, learned the intricacies of provincial government, studied military organization, and gained practical experience in judicial matters. Antoninus appointed Marcus to increasingly important positions, quaestor, consul, and eventually, in AD 146, tribune with full imperial power. Marcus shared the consulship with Antoninus 3 times, gaining experience in Rome's traditional magistracies even though real power now resided in the emperor alone. Marcus's relationship with his adoptive brother Lucius Verus developed during these years. Lucius was younger and temperamentally different from Marcus. Ancient sources describe Lucius as more interested in entertainment and luxury than philosophy and duty. yet the two appear to have maintained cordial relations. The succession plan clearly intended Marcus as the primary heir, with Lucius in a secondary position, though both held the title Caesar as designated successors. Despite his political responsibilities, Marcus continued his philosophical studies. He maintained regular contact with leading intellectuals throughout the empire. Studying grammar with the renowned teacher Marcus Cornelius Fronto and continuing his work in Stoic philosophy. Fronto's letters to Marcus, many of which survive, reveal the intellectual atmosphere of the imperial court and show Marcus as a devoted student who balanced rhetoric and philosophy. Antoninus Pius provided Marcus with crucial lessons in imperial governance. The older emperor demonstrated how to maintain authority without cruelty, how to manage the Senate with respect while holding ultimate power, and how to administer an enormous empire without constant military campaigns. Marcus observed that effective rule required attention to detail, careful selection of competent subordinates, and above all, consistent adherence to duty. These lessons would shape his own approach to power. Antoninus also showed Marcus the importance of continuity and stability. Unlike emperors who had pursued glory through conquest or innovation through radical reforms, Antoninus governed by maintaining what worked and changing only what necessity demanded. *** Sources used. ** Birley, Anthony R. Marcus Aurelius. A Biography, pp. 72-103 McLynn, Frank Marcus Aurelius. A Life, pp. 128-167 Van Ackeren, Marcel. A Companion to Marcus Aurelius, pp. 2341 Champlain, Edward, ** Fronto and Antonine Rome, pp. 6188 Part 4 Becoming Emperor on March 7, AD 161, Antoninus Pius died peacefully at his villa at Lorium, 12 miles from Rome. He was 74 years old and had ruled for nearly 23 years. Marcus, now 39, became emperor immediately. His first act demonstrated both his character and his unusual approach to power. Rather than accept sole rule, Marcus insisted that the Senate grant equal imperial authority to his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus. For the first time in Roman history, the empire would be governed by two emperors simultaneously. This decision puzzled some contemporaries and has intrigued historians ever since. Marcus certainly possessed legal authority to rule alone. The succession arrangements made his primacy clear. Some scholars suggest Marcus acted from Stoic principles of fairness and duty to Hadrian's original succession plan. Others argue he recognized the practical benefits of sharing the enormous burdens of imperial administration. A few historians propose that Marcus wanted to secure loyalty from Lucius's potential supporters and prevent any dynastic rivalry. Whatever his motivations, the joint rule proved workable. Marcus held ultimate authority in practice, managing domestic affairs and making final decisions, while Lucius received important assignments and public honors. The peaceful accession masked growing problems. The empire Marcus and Lucius inherited faced challenges Antoninus's long, stable reign had temporarily concealed. On the eastern frontier, the Parthian Empire, Rome's great rival, had invaded Armenia, a buffer kingdom whose control Rome considered vital to regional stability. The Parthian king had deposed the Roman client ruler and installed his own candidate, directly challenging Roman interests. Military response was necessary, but Rome's legions in the east had grown complacent during decades of peace. Marcus and Lucius decided that Lucius would command the eastern campaign personally. In AD 162, Lucius departed for Syria with reinforcements and instructions to restore Roman authority. The campaign would last 4 years. While Lucius held nominal command, actual military leadership fell to capable generals, particularly Avidius Cassius, who proved to be an aggressive and effective commander. Roman forces invaded Armenia, restored the client king, and then pushed deep into Mesopotamia, capturing the Parthian cities of Seleucia and Ctesiphon. The war ended in Roman victory, with Parthia forced to accept Roman dominance in Armenia, but victory came with catastrophic consequences. Roman soldiers returning from the east brought with them a devastating plague, likely smallpox or measles, diseases to which the Mediterranean population had no immunity. The Antonine plague, as it became known, spread rapidly throughout the empire. Ancient sources describe horrific mortality in both cities and military camps. Modern estimates suggest the plague may have killed between 10 and 20% of the empire's population over the next decade, though precise numbers are impossible to determine. The disease struck Rome itself, killing thousands daily at its height. The empire's economy contracted, military recruiting became more difficult, and the social fabric suffered terrible strain. While dealing with the plague's devastation, Marcus faced another crisis. Germanic tribes north of the Danube River, sensing Roman weakness or driven by their own pressures, began crossing the frontier in large numbers. The Marcomanni, Quadi, and other tribes invaded the provinces of Rhaetia, Noricum, and Pannonia. Some raiding parties pushed as far south as northern Italy itself, besieging the city of Aquileia. Rome had not faced such serious barbarian invasions in generations. Marcus responded with characteristic determination. He raised new legions, auctioned imperial treasures to fund military operations, and prepared to take personal command of the frontier campaigns. For a man who had spent his life studying philosophy and managing civil administration, this meant transforming himself into a military commander. Marcus proved capable of the task, not through brilliant generalship but through steady leadership and refusal to abandon duty despite his preference for philosophy over warfare. Sources used. Birley, Anthony R. Marcus Aurelius. A Biography, pp. 104-130 for McLynn Frank Marcus Aurelius. A Life, pp. 168-14 Cassius Dio, Roman History, Book 71, Sections 1-3 Gilliam J.F. The Plague under Marcus Aurelius, American Journal of Philology, Vol. 82, pp. 225-51 Part 5 Wars, Crisis, and Leadership. The Marcomannic Wars would dominate the remaining years of Marcus's reign. These were not single campaigns, but a series of interconnected conflicts fought over more than a decade against multiple Germanic and Sarmatian tribes along the Danube frontier. Marcus spent much of the period from AD 168 to his death in AD 180 either campaigning in person or managing military operations from frontier headquarters. The initial Germanic breakthrough forced Marcus to act decisively. He and Lucius Verus traveled north together in AD 168 to take command. Lucius fell ill and died in early AD 169, possibly another victim of the plague that continued ravaging the empire. Marcus pressed on alone. The early campaigns focused on driving invaders back across the Danube and stabilizing the frontier. This required not spectacular victories but methodical, grueling work, organizing supply lines, reinforcing garrisons, training new recruits to replace plague casualties, and coordinating multiple armies across hundreds of miles of frontier. Roman sources describe Marcus personally leading armies and enduring the hardships of campaign life. This was far from the comfortable philosophical existence he might have preferred. Military camps, even for emperors, meant crude quarters, simple food, and constant attention to logistics and strategy. Yet Marcus adapted. He rose early, attended to administrative correspondence, consulted with his generals, reviewed troop dispositions, and managed both military and civilian matters that required imperial decision. The campaigns were characterized by slow, methodical warfare rather than dramatic battles. Marcus's approach emphasized wearing down enemy resistance through superior resources and organization, rather than seeking glory through risky engagements. The nature of the Germanic threat was complex. The invading tribes were not unified under single command, but consisted of various groups with different motivations and capabilities. Some sought plunder, others wanted land to settle, and many were themselves being pushed westward by pressures from tribes further east. Rome could not simply defeat one enemy army and declare victory. Instead, Marcus had to fight multiple campaigns, negotiate with some tribes while warring against others, establish new fortifications, and fundamentally reorganize the frontier defense system. In AD 175, a serious crisis interrupted the northern campaigns. Avidius Cassius, the successful general from the Parthian War who now governed the eastern provinces, declared himself emperor. The sources disagree about his motivations. Some report that Cassius believed Marcus had died and acted to prevent chaos. Others suggest pure ambition. The revolt posed genuine danger because Cassius controlled wealthy provinces and experienced legions. Marcus prepared to march east, but before civil war could erupt, Cassius's own soldiers assassinated him. Marcus traveled to the east anyway, demonstrating clemency by refusing to punish Cassius's family and supporters severely. Though he did use the opportunity to inspect the eastern provinces and shore up administration there. Returning to the northern frontier, Marcus resumed the Germanic wars. By this point, he had developed a broader strategic vision. Rather than simply defending the existing Danube frontier, Marcus planned to annex new territories north of the river, creating two new provinces, Marcomannia and Sarmatia. This would push Roman control forward and eliminate the tribal threats at their source. Modern historians debate whether this plan was strategically sound or an overextension of Roman power. The question became moot when Marcus died before completing the conquest. It was during these long years on the frontier that Marcus composed his most famous work, the Meditations. This was not a formal philosophical treatise but a private journal, written in Greek, recording his thoughts and reflections. He wrote, scholars believe, primarily at night in his military quarters, using philosophy to maintain perspective and moral clarity amid the stress of command. The Meditations addressed fundamental questions: how to maintain virtue in difficult circumstances, how to accept mortality, how to fulfill duty without complaint, how to rule justly when holding supreme power. Marcus wrote these entries for himself, not for publication, which gives them unusual authenticity. They reveal a man struggling to live according to philosophical principles while bearing enormous responsibilities. The military situation gradually improved. By the late AD 170s, Roman forces had largely subdued the Germanic tribes and restored frontier security. Marcus's plan to create new provinces was taking shape, but the emperor's health was failing. Years of campaign life, the stress of constant warfare, and possibly chronic illness had worn him down. Ancient sources mention various ailments, though specific diagnosis is impossible from the available evidence. Sources used, Birley, Anthony R. Marcus Aurelius, a biography, pp. 135-12 McLynn Frank Marcus Aurelius, a life, pp. 215-342 Herodian History of the Empire, Book 1, Sections 2-6 Cassius Dio, Roman History, Book 71, Sections 6-14 Grant Michael The Antonines, The Roman Empire in Transition, pp. 3976 Part 6. The philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. To understand Marcus Aurelius fully requires examining the philosophical framework that guided his actions and shaped his understanding of leadership and duty. Stoicism, the school of thought Marcus embraced, had developed over centuries since its founding in Athens around 300 BC. By the Roman imperial period, Stoicism had evolved into a practical philosophy concerned primarily with ethics and right living rather than abstract metaphysics. The Stoic worldview held that the universe operated according to rational principles, which the Stoics called logos or divine reason. Human beings, possessing rationality themselves, participated in this cosmic order. The Stoics taught that virtue, meaning the perfection of rational nature, was the only true good. External things like wealth, health, reputation, and even life itself were indifferents. A wise person would recognize that these externals lay largely outside one's control and should therefore not determine one's happiness or peace of mind. What mattered was how one responded to circumstances, whether one acted with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-control. This philosophy provided Marcus with a framework for managing the enormous pressures of imperial rule. In the Meditations, he repeatedly reminded himself that he controlled only his own thoughts and actions, not events themselves. When faced with incompetent officials, unreliable allies, or military setbacks, he could focus on responding virtuously rather than being disturbed by circumstances beyond his power to change. This was not passive resignation, but active acceptance combined with vigorous effort in areas where effort could make a difference. Marcus's conception of duty flowed directly from Stoic principles. The Stoics believed that nature assigned each person a role in the cosmic order, and fulfilling that role constituted living according to nature. For Marcus, his role was emperor. He had not sought this position from ambition. Adoption had placed him there. But since fate or providence had made him emperor, his duty was to fulfill that role as excellently as possible. The Meditations contains numerous passages where Marcus reminded himself to perform his duties without complaint, to serve the common good, and to focus on being useful to the community rather than seeking pleasure or avoiding difficulty. Stoic ethics emphasize the interconnectedness of human beings. Marcus frequently reflected on the idea that all rational beings formed a single community, almost a single organism. This cosmopolitan perspective, unusual for its time, led Marcus to consider the welfare of all people under his rule, regardless of their social status or origin. His administrative decisions reflected this concern for justice and equity. He improved the legal status of slaves, reformed inheritance laws to protect family interests, and worked to ensure that provincial governors administered justice fairly. The Stoic acceptance of mortality runs throughout the Meditations. Marcus constantly reminded himself that death was natural, that life was brief, and that fame and accomplishment ultimately meant nothing in the vast scope of time. These reflections were not morbid but liberating. By accepting mortality fully, Marcus freed himself from the desperate grasping after immortality through reputation that drove many rulers to reckless wars or tyrannical behavior. He could focus simply on acting rightly in the present moment. Marcus's approach to anger and frustration drew heavily from Stoic teaching. The Meditations contains numerous exercises where Marcus worked to reframe provocative situations. When dealing with difficult people, he reminded himself that they acted from ignorance of what was truly good, that getting angry served no purpose, and that he himself had faults others tolerated. This was not naive optimism, but deliberate psychological training aimed at maintaining equanimity and responding to challenges rationally rather than emotionally. The Meditations was never intended for publication. Marcus wrote in Greek rather than Latin, probably because Greek was the traditional language of philosophy, and his own philosophical education had been primarily in Greek. The work has no clear organizational structure. Ideas repeat with variations. The entries read like a journal or commonplace book, where Marcus recorded thoughts that helped him maintain psychological and moral balance. Later generations discovered the text and recognized its value, but Marcus himself never imagined readers beyond himself. The relationship between Marcus's philosophy and his governance is crucial. Some modern writers portray him as a pure philosopher forced reluctantly into power, but this romanticizes the reality. Marcus understood that philosophy meant nothing if not practiced. Stoicism was not an escape from the world but a guide for acting within it. His philosophical principles directly influenced concrete policies. His emphasis on justice led to legal reforms protecting vulnerable populations. His cosmopolitan ethics shaped relatively humane treatment of defeated enemies, and his focus on duty drove him to spend years on uncomfortable military campaigns he personally disliked, but believed necessary for the empire's security. Yet Marcus was not naive about the limits of philosophy in political life. The Meditations shows him working to accept the gap between Stoic ideals and practical reality. He ruled an empire built on slavery, maintained by military force, and dependent on social hierarchies he recognized as unjust by Stoic standards. Rather than revolutionary reforms that might have destabilized society, Marcus worked within existing structures to improve conditions where he could while using philosophy to maintain his own moral integrity in an imperfect world. Sources used. Aurelius, Marcus, Meditations, translated by Gregory Hayes. Throughout Robertson, Donald, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. The Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, pp. 89-164 Hadot Pierre, The Inner Citadel. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, pp. 71-139 Rutherford, R.B., The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. A Study, pp. 45-98 Van Ackeren, Marcel, A Companion to Marcus Aurelius, pp. 227-64 Part 7, Family, Commodus, Final Years, Death and Legacy. Marcus's family life intertwined inseparably with his public role. His marriage to Faustina the Younger lasted over 30 years until her death in AD 175. Ancient sources, particularly the Historia Augusta, contain scandalous rumors about Faustina's alleged infidelities and plots. Modern historians treat these claims with extreme skepticism. Such rumors were common in Roman political invective and rarely reflect actual events. What evidence exists suggests Marcus loved Faustina genuinely and trusted her completely. He gave her unprecedented honors, took her on military campaigns, and after her death, established charitable foundations in her memory and had her deified. His personal writings in the Meditations express gratitude for their marriage. The couple's children faced the heartbreaking mortality rates typical of the ancient world. Of at least 13 children Faustina bore, only 6 survived to adulthood. These included 5 daughters and 1 son, Commodus, born in AD 161. The loss of so many children must have reinforced Marcus's Stoic acceptance of mortality, though the Meditations never directly discusses his personal grief. Commodus posed the central problem of Marcus's legacy. Born during his father's reign, Commodus was the first son born to a reigning emperor in nearly a century. The adoptive system that had produced the 5 good emperors depended on emperors choosing capable successors rather than passing power to biological children. Marcus faced a terrible choice. He could set aside his only surviving son and adopt a capable adult as heir, following the pattern of his predecessors. Or he could designate Commodus as successor, abandoning the adoptive principle, but avoiding the risk of civil war between a bypassed biological son and an adopted heir. Marcus chose Commodus. He raised the boy through the imperial hierarchy, granting him titles and responsibilities at each stage, and in AD 177 made him co-emperor. This decision has generated historical controversy for centuries. Why did the philosophical emperor, who understood virtue and capability, choose a son who would become one of Rome's most infamous rulers? Historians offer several interpretations. Some argue Marcus acted from simple parental affection, unable to set aside his son despite recognizing the boy's limitations. Others suggest political calculation. Passing over Commodus might have triggered immediate civil war, while designating him as heir at least ensured a peaceful succession, even if the long-term consequences proved disastrous. A third view holds that Commodus seemed acceptable during Marcus's lifetime and only revealed his worst qualities after gaining sole power. The ancient sources disagree, with some claiming Marcus knew his son's character and regretted the necessity of the choice, while others maintain Marcus believed Commodus showed promise. The most historically careful assessment acknowledges uncertainty. Marcus left no explanation of his reasoning. The Meditations, despite being a private work, contains no discussion of succession plans or worries about Commodus. By the time Commodus was designated co-emperor at age 16, Roman custom and political reality may have made any alternative choice impossible. Whatever Marcus's private thoughts, he committed the empire to his son. In March AD 180, while campaigning along the Danube frontier at Vindobona, modern Vienna, Marcus fell seriously ill. Ancient sources describe fever and various symptoms, but the precise illness remains unknown. As his condition worsened, Marcus prepared for death with characteristic Stoic composure. He arranged for Commodus to assume full authority and gave instructions to his commanders to complete the northern campaigns. On March 17, AD 180, Marcus Aurelius died at age 58. He had ruled for 19 years. Commodus immediately abandoned his father's plans to annex territories beyond the Danube. He negotiated peace treaties with the Germanic tribes and returned to Rome, where his reign rapidly descended into the erratic behavior and mismanagement that ancient historians chronicled with horror. Commodus's assassination in AD 192 led to civil war and the end of the Antonine dynasty. The period of stability and good government that Marcus represented was definitively over. Ancient historians evaluated Marcus with near-universal praise. Cassius Dio, writing within decades of Marcus's death, called him a philosopher who ruled with virtue and dedication despite facing unprecedented challenges. Herodian, while noting the contrast between Marcus and Commodus, portrayed the father as a model of imperial excellence. Even the problematic Historia Augusta, compiled much later, presented Marcus as the ideal emperor. Christian writers, despite persecutions that occurred during Marcus's reign, generally respected him as a virtuous pagan. The Senate deified Marcus immediately after his death, and his reputation remained untarnished throughout subsequent Roman history. Medieval and Renaissance thinkers knew Marcus primarily through the Meditations, which circulated in manuscript form and was eventually printed. The work's emphasis on duty, virtue, and self-control appealed to Christian moralists who saw in Marcus a pagan precursor to their own ethical ideals. Frederick the Great of Prussia kept a copy beside his bed. Enlightenment philosophers admired Marcus as proof that philosophy and power could combine beneficially. Modern scholarship provides a more nuanced assessment. Historians recognize Marcus's genuine philosophical commitment and generally virtuous rule while acknowledging his limitations. His military campaigns, while necessary given the Germanic invasions, consumed enormous resources and may have weakened the empire economically. His persecution of Christians, carried out through provincial governors enforcing traditional religious requirements, contradicted his philosophical cosmopolitanism. His choice of Commodus as successor had catastrophic consequences, whether or not Marcus could have reasonably chosen differently. Yet Marcus's reputation endures for valid reasons. He demonstrated that holding supreme power need not corrupt completely, that philosophical principles could guide political decision-making, and that duty could motivate leadership without requiring cruelty or megalomania. The Meditations remains genuinely inspiring precisely because it shows an imperfect man struggling to live according to his ideals while bearing crushing responsibilities. Marcus never claimed to have achieved wisdom or perfection. The Meditations reveals his constant effort to improve, to maintain virtue, and to fulfill duty despite his own limitations and desires. Marcus Aurelius matters to modern readers and historians not as a flawless hero, but as a realistic example of philosophical leadership. He faced genuine crises with determination, maintained his principles under pressure, and left behind a record of his inner struggle that continues to resonate. His legacy includes both his largely successful governance during extraordinarily difficult circumstances and his honest, private reflections on how to live well while accepting human limitations. This combination of effective rule and genuine philosophical reflection makes Marcus Aurelius one of the most admirable figures in Roman history and explains why, more than 18 centuries after his death, his name still commands respect. *** Sources used. *** Birley, Anthony R. Marcus Aurelius. A Biography, pp. 213-67 McLynn Frank Marcus Aurelius. A Life, pp. 343-447 Cassius Dio, Roman History, Book 72, Sections 33-36 Historia Augusta, Life of Marcus Aurelius, Sections 1829 Hexter, Olivier, Commodus, An Emperor at the Crossroads, pp. 2356 Edelstein, Ludwig, The Meaning of Stoicism, pp. 97-118 Farquharson, ASL Marcus Aurelius, His Life and His World, pp. 341-389.